I gave it quite a lot of thought last night, and I was like, what can I offer you that can really give you a comprehensive idea of how to actually really change the way that you present on camera, okay? And I know that that comes from a nervous system experience, but I also thought that perhaps I can actually even add to that a little bit more and give you a contrasting experience between the nervous system and maybe some, acting or vocal techniques that you've already learned from coaches. So, okay, there's a couple of things I want to explain first, okay? I've talked about the idea of both visibility and vulnerability on camera. Now, vulnerability can kind of seem like a bit of a scary word to some of us, okay? It sounds like, we're supposed to be bleeding out all over the place, and that's just not the truth. Vulnerability is really about having more of you show up. That is what I mean by being vulnerable. It's about not needing to hide so many things about ourselves. Now, one way we can do that is by not hiding what's going on inside, not by necessarily sharing our emotions or even our thoughts, but simply by allowing more of our viscera to be vulnerable. Okay, so I really want you to think about it in those terms. The nervous system is really, really deeply connected to the viscera. Okay, and so if we can actually allow more of our insides to be seen without necessarily having to say or do anything more than just simply being more open. So this is what it means by being vulnerable, by being open, by being available. Okay, so that's the first thing to understand, is that we actually just want to have more of us show up. And by more of us show up, that means more of our body, more of our internal organization show up. Okay, that gets seen. So that's a real important part of performance, is or presenting both of those things. So I coach actors as well, so that's why I said about performance, because it's for an actor to be on stage and for their internal processes to be seen by an audience, so just their thoughts to be seen, their ruminations to be seen, there's a lot of openness and a lot of vulnerability that needs to be there. They're not saying any words, but they're actually conveying a lot. Now, we can convey a lot by simply having an open nervous system. All right, one that's available for connection, one that's available for interaction, one that's available for communication. And so that's the piece that we want to develop, right? That's beyond the thinking mind, beyond cognition, as we call it. Okay. So that's the first piece of information I want to pass through. The second piece of information is that all nervous system works because we pay attention to our nervous system. So any technique that I teach you today will have limited benefit unless you're actually paying attention to your nervous system. So it's great because the nervous system is, a largely automatic or involuntary kind of process, right? We breathe, we don't really take a lot of conscious breaths. Okay, we may if we're doing a breath practice, but we're not consciously breathing all the time. When we go to sleep, we do not have to kind of hook ourselves up to something that keeps us breathing. Okay, the same with how we regulate our temperature, how we manage our heartbeat. All those things are generally involuntarily managed by our body, and that's the part of the nervous system that we're primarily working in, the parts that we can't really control consciously. So that's why nervous system works a little bit kind of, like how do we get a hold on nervous system work? So the way that we get our hold on nervous system work is we pay attention. Okay, so for me, when I pay attention to my experience inside, now I do this because our nervous system is very much connected to the gut-brain axis. So although that is not the entirety of our nervous system, most of our nervous system is in our core, really from our throat down to our belly. That's where a lot of, and our brain, of course, but a lot of our nervous system activity really is felt in our core area between the throat and the belly. Okay. So I refer to the belly rather than the stomach because anatomically, the stomach is sort of underneath the rib cage, really up here on the left hand side. Okay, so the belly, you know, is quite a bit lower. Okay, so paying attention is what we need to do for nervous system work to work. All right, so that's developing awareness. That's where I kind of come into working when I'm coaching people, because I'm actually helping their brains develop more neural pathways so they can pay attention to their body. All right, we have a lot of neural pathways dedicated to our thoughts and to our emotions. All right, to how we feel, we have a lot of neural pathways that are heading in that direction. There's nothing wrong with that. What we actually want to do is build more neural pathways so we can also notice our body with about the same kind of level of awareness, at least. Our body, in my belief, is actually sending more information than our brains or our thoughts or our mind and our emotions actually do. I feel like our bodies are sending a lot more information about that. They seem to send it earlier anyway, at least, right? So there's this kind of like prior notice that comes from our bodies before it reaches our thoughts or emotions. So for me, I like to really get in underneath everything, okay? So we need to learn to pay attention to our sensations of our body, to what is actually happening inside. Now, you know, that's built over time. It's built over practice. But we can just do that today simply by just taking a little moment to tune in, maybe to your heart beat, right? We're not just tuning into the chakra point or anything else. We actually just want to tune in, or the heart space. We actually want to tune in beyond the heart space. See if we can notice our heartbeat, at least the pulse that's moving through our body. Okay. And then if you put your hand anywhere really on your, if you want to put it on your upper belly or your lower belly, okay, there's sort of like, you may want to go right up here, which I call the hara point, right? That's our power point, or down a bit lower right into the belly, which is closer to the sacral chakra, right? Not quite, but it's a bit lower than the solar plexus, right? So you can tune in there. And again, you're trying not to necessarily, I mean, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to try too hard, is what I want to say. But you can at least just feel into the space, right? So you're just aware of the space, aware of whatever is going on in that space, right? So that's just to start to building awareness of the nervous system. So you need that in order to be able to work with the nervous system. Nervous system work doesn't really work if you're not paying attention, okay? So now we're actually going to do the practice. So just to understand that that's actually part of the practice, because we need it to be able to actually do it. And that's an important part of really understanding. We're not just sort of going off and running off and doing a practice without being mindful about it. We really have to pay attention to our practice. Practice is really easy. We just need to be able to pay attention. So let's do the practice. Okay. So the practice is basically making a VOO sound. Okay. Now it was taught to me by my teacher, Dr. Peter Levine. Okay. So this particular way of doing, well, he taught the VOO practice, and I've kind of developed some ways of doing it myself, but it is his practice. Okay. So I want to acknowledge that it is not something I have made up. Okay. So it's called the VOO sound, VOO as in viscera, okay? Now, the idea of it is that it's sort of supposed to sound a bit like a foghorn, okay? It's certainly not meant to sound pretty, All right. So we really don't want to be trying to have, have a perfect tone or a perfect sound as we do this. In fact, the lower and the more atonal, I think, the better. All right. So don't be afraid to sound bad. All right. I really encourage you, don't be afraid to sound bad. All right. So it's a VOO sound. And what we're actually trying to do is vibrate our viscera. Okay, this is why all the V's. Please understand, it's actually really important. It creates a certain vibration in the viscera that can actually then create openness in our nervous system. And if you remember what I was saying earlier about openness, availability, and vulnerability, that's what we're trying to do. So we're trying to create an openness in our nervous system through this little perturbation, is what we might like to call it. A perturbation is a little bit of a shake. Okay, so for some people who have quite tightly closed viscera, possibly because of anxiety, or maybe even something like fibromyalgia, right? Some form of impediment in some way may actually cause quite a closed, tight nervous system. So we only want to perturb that a little bit. Okay, for somebody who doesn't really have those sorts of things, they may be able to tolerate more perturbation. Okay, so this is why we have to have the awareness of our nervous system. All right, this is the reason why we need the awareness, because if we perturb our nervous systems a little too much, we need to have a sense of, well, that might be enough. I won't do another. All right. So that's the point of being aware. All right. Or I won't do another for a moment or two until I feel myself settle. That's what all of us need to do. All right. So I will use myself as a little bit of a demonstration and talk you through this. Okay. The first thing I do is I take a cleansing breath, just to clean out my system. Remember, it's meant to sound like a foghorn. Now, I didn't take that all the way through to the end of my breath. And I really want to encourage you to know that this is not a breath practice. This is not a vocal practice. Okay, this is a nervous system practice. So all of those old rules about sounding good or doing it to the full length of your breath do not apply. Because just doing it for that length of time, I am aware of a very slight change in this part of my nervous system. We've got a lot of nerves, cranial nerves, that link up to our vagus nerve, which is the main nerve of connection. Okay, so already my kind of nervous system pathways to connection have opened up a little bit more. I see somebody said, oh, it sounds awful. Yeah, exactly. You're not like really and you can set, I like to set it as like, I like to set people tasks to do bad art, and I say the same thing as, let's just make bad noise, right? It's not, we don't have to make, this is not supposed to sound pretty. So what we want to do when we make that sound is we want to check in and see where we think we got the vibration to. So this is about paying attention. So excuse me, we're going to do it again now, and you're going to see if you can notice where the vibration may have got to. All right, yes, someone's already felt the release. There is. So, and it's a release in the nervous system. All right, it's a nervous system release, one that you can't get doing so many other things, right? It's specifically a nervous system release. And remembering, just, for all intents and purposes and care, is that if you do have chronic illness or headaches, migraines, these sorts of things, just take this exercise carefully and check in how you're feeling after you do one, and make it a quite short one, okay? And if you're up to it, many people can be, right, after a good period of settling. So it's not about that you can't necessarily do the exercise, but you may need more time between VOOs, all right? So that's why I've given a bit of space here and kind of talked about stuff, because maybe all of you might be ready for a second one, right? Some of you may have been ready almost immediately, but others may need a little bit more time of that kind of settling of that perturbation. Right? There's nothing wrong with kind of like jumping in, but from a nervous system perspective, it works way better if we actually do something and then settle from the activity before we repeat. All right. So I see a lot of, actually, I'll explain that one after the next breath. I'm going to talk to you so that we have another little gap. Okay. So we're going to do it again together. And it's really in your own time, right? You're not following me. This is your nervous system. I'm just talking you through it. So another cleansing breath. And then in your own time, just take a little breath in and watch where the vibration goes. Yep, I could feel a lot in my chest, but I actually felt it down to my solar plexus that time. But I definitely felt a lot kind of like moving around there in my chest. So all the way through down to my solar plexus on that occasion. If you're really tight, or if you're really tense, or if you're really stressed out, you may only feel it in your throat. If you've got quite a lot of freeze in your system from trauma, you probably will only feel it in your throat. Okay, it doesn't matter. This is just giving you information. Stuff about the nervous system is just information. I'm just going to check the comments here, and then I'm going to tell you the other thing. Yeah, so we're still all fine for comments. If somebody has an experience from that, like if you notice, like some people can get a little lightheaded, right? So just notice that if you get lightheaded, that just means you just need to settle from that. That may have been the first release of the day, the first time that you kind of like your nervous system decided to open up to something today. All right. So what I wanted to say about doing stuff and seeing and waiting to see the effects of doing, all right, is this. So if you think about times when you may have felt anxious, right? I see a lot, I don't do this, but I see a lot of people breathing it out when they're anxious, right? So they're, right? Or, right, trying to breathe out some of that anxiety. So I don't actually find that to be particularly effective. But what I want to do is talk to that as an example. If you were doing something like that, what a lot of people do is they just keep breathing and breathing and breathing and breathing and breathing and breathing, right? You get the picture, until they feel better, all right? When you're working with the nervous system, what you want to do is breathe a few times and then take a break from that and watch and wait for the effects of your actions before you take another step, before you repeat, before you do something else because you decide it's not working, right? This is, again, a really key element of nervous system work is paying attention. This time it's paying attention to the effects of our actions. And so you can see actually how there's quite a spiritual component to nervous system work. If some of you have studied Buddhism or various things like that, you'll notice that some of my languaging is quite close to some ideas about karma and action, all right, and right action and spiritual action. It's not necessarily intentional, but that's actually how closely aligned our nervous system is with our spirituality. Okay, so the effects of our actions on our own bodies is so important. All right, we don't want to do violence to our bodies by doing until we're in a position to receive the information about the effects of our doing. You can probably see how that can even lead to things like burnout and and injury and also and illness, all sorts of problems, if we do and wait till we're in a position to receive the information about the effects of our doing. So we want to slow down a little bit and do a few times, maybe even once, as I'm teaching you here, before we do again. And it's not about a time factor. It's about, well, how does my body feel about doing it right now factor. So I'm going to tell you, check in now with your body. Right, quite, consciously check in with your body and see where it's at. I can feel quite a bit of, can feel my legs aren't quite so smooth, calm. There's a little bit of kind of just a really small amount of tingling happening in my legs. So I think there's a little bit of an aliveness happening, and that makes me more available and potentially even more vulnerable. But I also want to stay grounded, and I don't want to push myself into a place where I may be feeling uncomfortable. All right. So I'm just sort of checking that out and watching that, seeing how that is for me. And let me check the comments and see if anybody else is, yep, in your throat. Somebody has said, yeah, exactly. Great. I'm glad that you noticed that, Leslie. I've fibromyalgia and bronchial issues, so a little lightheaded but feel okay. So you'll just find that you'll settle. We always do, but it just maybe takes a little time. I'm wondering how the lightheadedness is for you now. And I'm going to show you a third and final way, and then I'm going to give you a contrast to nervous system work. There's actually quite a lot more detail than perhaps we'd all planned for, but I'm a bit inclined to give lots. All right, so the third one is to start actually waking up the facial muscles, okay? So it's again staying with the VU. Again, you don't have to make it. So when we're doing this one, we'll probably make it a little longer. But it's starting to wake up the facial muscles, which is really essential for being able to communicate on video and not kind of be tight around the jaw, because our tightness around the jaw, even if other people don't consciously realize that, when we're tight around the jaw, we're actually communicating aggression. So that's where our aggression, if we're primates, or we come from the mammalian nervous system. I sounded like I was mumming there, but it's a mammalian nervous system. When we have our mammalian nervous system, we actually use our jaw to communicate things like aggression. So we actually want to have a loose jaw. So I've got a few great loose jaw techniques, but I want to keep this on the same theme as the VU. So I'm going to teach this particular one, and just have a go. Watch me first, and then you can have a go. Okay. Oh, wow. Wow. So again, it's still using the vibration. So I can feel all that kind of really sort of gently caressing my ears and all the cranial nerves that kind of like run up and down here. And it's a kind of really nice feeling. And it's also activated some of my facial muscles. So the muscles of the face is the most essential part of our availability for connection. So if we're tight anywhere, regardless of whether we're, involuntarily or subconsciously communicating aggression, we also want to communicate that we're available. It's why when somebody smiles, it feels more welcoming. But it's more than just a smile. There's so many other little facial nerves that are going on there with the eyes, which is why, people say, are they smiling with the eyes, right? That's how we tell. It's not about using those gross muscles. It's actually like these tiny little cranial nerves start to work. Okay. So hopefully you've had a little go at doing that while I've talked. And if not, you can at another point. It doesn't matter about what sound you make, like the wah or the wee or whatever. You're really just trying to get the vibration. You may start with a voo, wow, wow, wee, woo, wow, woo, wow, wee, right? It may sort of look like that. Doesn't matter. It's according to your own facial muscles, what they're available for. Everybody's muscles, facial muscles, are going to have different degrees of tightness. So just to give you an example of the contrast, right? So you're sitting here and you're doing quite a lot of nervous system work. So this is the last little piece I want to do, just so that you can feel the difference. I'm going to give you a vocal coaching exercise, so that you can totally, and there's nothing wrong with doing this. It's a great exercise to do it to prepare for videos. So get it, keep it in there, right? Don't ignore it. But I really want you to feel the difference between doing nervous system work and doing vocal coaching work. All right. So one of the things I learned when I was a young actor on the stage in Melbourne when I was growing up, I was working at the St Martin's Youth Theatre Company, and I did a lot of work in youth productions, actually all around Melbourne when I was growing up. And I learned a lot of techniques around how to use my voice, how to project my voice on stage. I was primarily a stage actor. And a great one, and actually I've used it in choirs as well. So if you've ever sung in a choir, or you may have also tried this one out. And it's literally just making the kind of bubble sounds that kids make in the bath. All right, so it's okay. You don't have to have a tune. That tune just came out. You don't have to have a tune. I find it sort of easier to kind of do that. But if you tune in, you'll feel how that's very much isolated to the lips. Now, after having done the nervous system work, can you feel how much deeper that is? Like there's so much more depth. We went right down somewhere here, somewhere inside ourselves. Now, this is the part that can express also, even with us not even trying, because we went in deep. All right. This is what is all of those kind of nuances of ourself is available because we went in deeper than just simply exercising our lips. Okay, so I hope that you can really sense the difference there. Both are valuable, both are completely fine and valid. It's like saying, there's nothing, like when because I teach people about the body and the nervous system, I also bring in the mind and the emotions into the work. But I'm just trying to get people to have an experience of something that they don't tend to pay as much attention to. But all are valid, right? There is nothing wrong with any of those things, and we don't want to discount anything. Actually, all experience is desirable. And that's another little tip of the hat, I guess, to spirituality, in that we don't need to judge any of our experiences as good or bad or wrong or right or wanted or unwanted. We can just simply say that we are having an experience. So I hope today you got to have an experience of your own nervous system. And it's been a real pleasure to teach this piece to you. I know that it's actually been quite a half an hour of teaching. So I hope that you've really enjoyed it as much as I have.